So apparently we are in what now has been nicknamed the Year of the Ninja. Bizarre coincidence where two of the biggest dormant ninja franchises have had new entries. And while I'm very familiar with Ninja Gaiden, I've never actually gotten into Shinobi. Thought it'd be cool just to make a video about a Shinobi entry, but the question came of, well, which one? The Genesis games or the PS2 games? The decision was very quickly determined when I saw the Japanese and European box art for the PS2 game and that insanely badass red scarf. So, yeah, Shinobi for PS2. Before going into the game, though, I kind of want to talk a little bit about the developer because I don't know, I just find this stuff kind of neat. But the game was developed by Overworks and published by Sega. I was confused at this fact that the series, which, yeah, Shinobi is a series that's been around since the arcade days in '87 and actually predates Ninja Gaiden, but it was completely being rebooted in 3D for the modern era. And Sega just seemed to assign some random developer I had never even heard of. However, Overworks is Sega. It was one of Sega's internal development studios. So back in those ye old arcade days I mentioned before, Sega decided to split their arcade and console developers into several different semi-autonomous studios. The AM R&Ds, which stood for Amusement Machine Research and Development for the arcade games, and the CS R&Ds, which stood for Consumer Research and Development for console games. The CS Studios came much later, though, and the second division, CS2, was created to make Sega Saturn games. They actually are the team that made Sakura Taisen or Sakura Wars, as you may not or not know in the West, and a lot of the lead staff of that studio were people that were heavily involved in the development of the original Shinobi arcade games, so yeah. But anyways, a bunch of complicated, confusing shit happened internally at Sega. Studios expanding and multiplying and splitting off and reforming and whatever the fuck, and CS2 ended up turning into AM7, and the moniker of CS2 would begin to a different internal studio at some point in the early 2000s. The AM and CS labels would completely go away, and AM7 reestablished themselves as Overworks Studios. As to why you haven't heard of Overworks since, well, they're still around technically, but they ended up getting absorbed by Sega WoW, which was formerly AM1. You know, the guys who made
The House of the Dead.
Oh, and that studio that took the title of CS2 ended up turning into Sonic Team. I feel like at some point I would really like to make a whole video going over Sega's history, or because it's some interesting stuff. People tend to simplify Sega's history by its rise and fall in the console market, but that really is only half of their story. These guys were fucking trailblazers back in the arcade scenes. And this is important to any discussion of Shinobi PS2 because of how much of its design and philosophy can be traced back to classic arcade games. This is a massive advantage that Shinobi has compared to a good chunk of modern action games out there. Like, a lot of action games nowadays can't just be that. Action games. They have to dilute themselves by dipping its toes into other genres and subgenres to compensate for any lack of any real meaningful identity, like just randomly inserting tedious RPG mechanics and side quest bullshit to bloat the overall length of the game to make those $70 totally worth it, guys, I promise. Burning through $500 million for every project and abusing our workers to make that rock on the floor just the prettiest goddamn rock you've ever seen is what makes a modern classic these days. Hey, remember when video games were video games?
Damn, that's crazy.
What a wild time that was. Shinobi is an action platformer. You jump and cut people. That's it. No bullshit. Nice and simple. Focused and with intent. It's like Mega Man, but instead of jumping and shooting, you're jumping and cutting. And it gets me rock hard. rock man hard. But the simplicity of the game's design and the hidden depth is what makes it feel arcade-like. There's an elegance to a simple idea, just executed well. In my opinion, this is how you make a game that can stand the test of time. The real selling point that makes it all come together is Hotsuma's scarf, but also the core gimmick of the game, the Tate system. The idea is to emulate the trope in any piece of media involving a katana, where the guy with the sword slices through his opponent and time and space freezes around him until the sword is sheathed. You know exactly what I'm talking about, so if you're the guy who never gets tired of that, then this game was specifically made for you, because that's the whole point of the game. The Japanese version of a cool guy not looking at explosions. But this only activates after killing at least 4 enemies in succession. By the second stage, your cursed sword, Akujiki, awakens and is thirsty for them souls, girl. The sword stacks damage multipliers with each enemy you kill, and you'll end up in situations where you kill like 10 enemies and your damage buff will be so high that you can one-shot stronger enemies and even bosses. Fucking nutty. However, not only is there a time limit on the buff, but the sword starts to slowly sap meter. Once it's completely empty, it'll start to drain your life. This ends up making a gameplay loop where everything sort of feeds into each other. You have to kill enemies quickly and in groups to not only activate a satisfying finishing move, but upon Tate's activation, you receive orbs to refill your sword meter to keep yourself alive, and the more enemies you kill in a single Tate, the more souls you gain for your meter, with more of a likelihood to get health as a reward, and a bigger score by the end of the stage. This also incentivizes you to push forward constantly on the move, because the more you stay still, the more your life drains, and the more you're at a disadvantage later in the level. Not like this matters too much, since 90% of the time you won't be dying from getting mauled by enemies, or from the sword sapping your HP, but by getting thwacked a single time, and getting fucking Izuna dropped into a black pit of insta-death on some Castlevania type shit. What makes this especially ball-busting is that the only checkpoints in this game are between stages and just before boss fights. This isn't the biggest deal ever, though. I mean, I'm one of those psychotic, sadistic assholes who genuinely believes anyone playing Devil May Cry 3 for the first time should do so in yellow mode. But you'll really start to feel the burn once you get into the later stages of the game, where they can go on for like 15 fucking minutes. And I mean, even in like classic NES games like Castlevania, if you died, which was a lot, you'd restart levels that were like 3 to 5 minutes long maybe. But in Shinobi, oops, I got bonked by a flying enemy's projectile off screen that I couldn't even react to. Time to restart the entire fucking level and claw my eyes out. Getting to line up 10 enemies, blazing through them, and ending it all with a super big Tate as the camera gives multiple action shots of all the shit you've just wrecked, and cutting back to Hotsuma going, "Omae wa mou shindeiru," and having all the enemies explode into screaming, bloody red candy, and all of it just flooding towards you like you won the jackpots. Some of the most insanely addicting shit you can find out there on the PS2, and that's saying a hell of a lot. And this just doesn't get old to me. Here is a pro tip. This one is actually pretty essential. I don't think it's possible to even beat the final stage without this, and the game never explains it, and it's not in the manual either. I looked, but you will be saved a massive fucking headache on the 6th stage, especially if you know this, trust me. So this game's mid-air combat works on Smash Bros. Rules. You get 2 jumps and 1 air dash, alright? It doesn't matter what order you do it in, even if you jump, dash, and then jump again, that's it. You'll immediately drop afterwards. Only after looking up a speedrun did I find that this game has tech akin to an enemy step from DMC. You only get 1 air dash unless you slash an enemy. Then this restarts your air dash counter. So if you jump, air dash into a flying enemy, slash them, air dash back into them to close the gap, and slash again. Then there's your ticket to beating these guys instantly. Rinse and repeat. Just jump, dash, slash, dash, slash, dash, slash, dash, slash, etc. So just keep that in mind, please. This game was a goddamn nightmare on first playthrough. So I don't want to go ahead and glaze this game too much. While I definitely would call this game a hidden gem, it's not exactly in the realm of PS2 classics. I mean, we got cursed choppers in this bitch. I don't know what was up in this era of action games and thinking that fighting helicopters and evil helicopters was like the coolest fucking thing ever conceived by man. Shinobi is a AA game and everything good and not so good that comes with that title. Boss fights are interesting. They for sure tried something. On one hand, it's a neat idea to have them act as a sort of buffed up regular enemy, but then the scoring system seems to be designed in a way to directly oppose it. I also mentioned this before about one-shotting bosses. That's cool and all, but it can only be done with you taking out the other weaker enemies first. The problem with that is that in every boss fight you have to essentially wait out the first phase with you fighting them one-on-one. And that part sucks ass. I think maybe the intention was to have first-time players get acclimated to the boss's moveset before they start throwing more enemies and risk you getting overwhelmed. But on repeated playthroughs, this is just a massive pain in the ass and boring. And so far, I can't figure out if there's a way to make them spawn faster or not. It kind of just happens. But then, if you want the player to first understand the boss's moveset and complex AI patterns, then why are they also punished by just fighting the bosses and experimenting? Because the absolute biggest points for your overall score that trumps everything else comes from the boss point. The boss points are determined by how few attacks you killed the boss in. You should aim to kill the boss in one hit, and if you just sit there and wail on them until the second phase, then you were penalized, which is another thing I only found out about after looking through the manual. For example, one of the hardest bosses in the game, I shit you not, is the first boss. And it's because, is it because it has moves that aren't well telegraphed? Does it do crazy damage and break you out of your combos and do unreactable command grabs? No. It's the minions. Oh, so the minions are super hard and they're kicking your ass the whole time. No. It's because there's only 3 of them. So, you know how in most games, when you add more enemies to the boss fight, it actually makes it more annoying or more difficult? Well, remember, this game is designed around that idea. The more minions there are, the easier the fight actually is. I don't know if the devs kind of forgot about that. And so in order to not get a completely dookie ass score on this level, you must cheese the boss. You can only do that by hitting the missiles with your kunai before they're fired. They have like a 2-centimeter hitbox next to the chopper. But when they fly at you, you better watch out, because these things will fuck you up if you're within a mile radius, and will most likely kill some of the minions, screwing you over. This is the only way to do this without the game considering it a hit on the boss and lowering your score, but you better get patient because it's all pretty much RNG. You can sit around for 5 minutes just waiting for this fucker to fire the missiles, and it just won't. And it just doesn't feel like it. The pilot was asleep that day. You can even die from the sword absorbing your health from sitting there for way too long. This is probably the worst aspect of all the bosses, just sitting there and waiting and waiting and waiting. Completely reliant on PS2 era AI to do its job and summon the goddamn jobbers already. I definitely think something that could have helped the fight stand out more, or at least be more interesting, is if maybe they had some sort of mechanic where they could also one-shot you if you're not careful. Hell, maybe You can even have a back and forth where you have to kill more enemies before they do, and it becomes a fight for resources and power buffs. And if you have Akujiki, the fully charged, the boss will become more defensive and attempt to block and dodge your moves. And if they become fully charged, you have to do the same thing and play more defensive and completely shift the dynamic of regular gameplay. I don't know, man. Something fuck. And don't even get me started on the final boss, bro. I'm getting fucking heated just thinking about it. Ah! But this is just one of those games, man. A forgotten game from a bygone era. I'm really glad I stumbled upon it because, well, yeah, I'm no boomer. I'm in my late 20s, so I'm getting there. But this isn't a situation of old man yelling at clouds, even though, yeah, I get where people would be coming from, but it's just so rare to find games like these. You have to go back in time. It's the only place you can find this kind of design philosophy on major platforms. I mean, thank God indie games are at least keeping the spirit of these older games alive. There's just something beautiful about simple, elegant design. You know, art through adversity. The more restrictions you're faced with, you end up having to be more creative in which ways the player can interact with the game's limited mechanics. Video games as an industry have gotten so big and so goddamn bloated, monotonous, and homogenized that they can't ever just exist as singular works with impact. It makes me yearn for a time long since past, one that many future gamers, trademark, will never experience, and that's just a gosh dang kick in the pants. But I, for one, remember. I think more people should also remember. Not every game can be preserved for all of eternity, but with how still inaccessible so many hidden gems are, even downright classics are, I almost feel obligated to talk about them. Even though this is my first time ever playing this game and even getting into the series, I still felt pretty nostalgic going through it. Shit was different, man. I don't know. And it just makes me a little sad. But yeah, solid 7 out of 10. Not a good game, but a great game. Don't expect any consistent release of content or anything. I kind of just made this because I was bored, but who knows. Anyways, thanks for watching, if you watched it. That's it.